Rain over Route 9 fell soft and steady, turning the Vermont asphalt into a black mirror. A Range Rover took the curve too fast, and the rear of a rust-pocked Airstream rose to meet it. Metal kissed aluminum with a low, ugly crunch. The Range Rover door opened. A woman stepped out, voice already in legal mode. "I'll cover everything. My attorney's name is—" The camper door opened. A man stepped down. Broad shoulders, gray flannel worn through at both elbows. Jeans dark with engine grease, 2 days of stubble. He looked at her. "You're Richard Carrington's daughter, aren't you?" Adeline froze between syllables. She had not given her name. She had not given anything. The Range Rover was rented under her assistant's legal name. No itinerary had left her phone except a single line to her Uncle Vance. A few days in Vermont, back by the weekend. She stepped back half a step, the defensive reflex of a woman who had spent 20 years reading rooms before entering them. "Who are you? How do you know my father's name?" The man did not answer right away. He walked around to the back of the camper, crouched, ran a thumb along the depressed seam where her bumper had folded into his rear quarter. He stood up slowly. "I can pull this back out. You don't need to file anything." Adeline did not care about the camper. She stood in the rain with water running from her hair down the back of her collar, and she did not move. The man finally turned to her. "My name is Owen Howerin. My father was Daniel Howerin. He served under your father, Howerin." The word opened a drawer in her memory she had not opened in 22 years. A black and white photograph in her father's office. 2 men in desert fatigues against the side of a Humvee. Her father's handwriting across the bottom in fountain pen. "For Dan, who carried me home." Her voice came out different. "Is your father still alive?" "Died in 2019. Lungs." Silence. Only the rain and the Range Rover engine still idling behind her, the windshield wipers ticking against nothing. Her CEO instincts told her to call legal, call security, leave. The name Daniel Howerin told her something else. 22 years of a locked door had just been unlocked by a stranger in a wet flannel shirt. She reached back into the Range Rover and killed the engine. She followed him into the camper. The inside surprised her. It was not a man living in a vehicle. It was a man living in a home that happened to have wheels. Books arranged by spine height on a fitted shelf. A kerosene lamp with clean glass. A framed photograph of a woman with dark hair laughing into a camera. Beside a smaller frame of an infant, wrapped in a hospital blanket. At the back of the camper, in the narrow bench seat under the window, a girl of about 8 sat reading. She looked up when Adeline came in. She did not seem surprised. She nodded once, the way an adult might acknowledge a guest, and went back to her book. "My daughter," Owen said. "Mira." "Hi," Mira said quietly, and turned a page. Owen poured tea from a kettle on the small propane stove. He set a mug in front of Adeline, then walked to the shelf and took down a leather-bound journal. The cover was worn pale at the corners. The spine carried a thin scar of old burn. He set it on the table between them. "What is that?" Adeline asked, though she already knew. "Your father's field journal. Desert Storm. January through April of 1991. He sent it to my father for safekeeping in 2003, 3 weeks before he died." Adeline did not touch the journal. Her hand stayed on the table, flat. "My father committed suicide," she said. Her voice was the voice she used in earnings calls. "I read the medical examiner's report." Owen looked at her. He did not deny it. He did not confirm it. He only said, "Do you want to read it?" She did not open the journal yet. She asked him, first, why he had never come looking for her to deliver it. Owen answered without flinching. His father had been specific. "Don't go to her. Let her come to you." Daniel Howerin had believed that if Adeline arrived at this camper under her own will, she would be ready for what was inside it. If she had to be told, she would not be. He had kept the journal in this camper, this same 1978 Airstream his father had bought with Army savings in 1992 for 22 years. Every winter he drained the pipes. Every spring he checked the seals. The journal had moved with him through 3 states, through the death of his wife, through the long single year when he and Mira had lived out of this camper full-time while he rebuilt his life one job at a time. "Have you read it?" Adeline asked. "Once. In 2019, after my father died. I needed to know what I was carrying." He paused. The tea steam rose between them. "Your father did not commit suicide, Miss Carrington. The last page he wrote was the day before he died. On that page he wrote the name of the man he was afraid of. The name was not yours. Adeline set her mug down too hard. Tea sloshed onto the wood. She opened the journal. The first page was her father's handwriting. The handwriting she remembered only from birthday cards, and one note tucked into her 7th grade lunchbox before he shipped to Bosnia, January 17, 1991. Kuwait. Today, Dan Halloran pulled me out of a burning Humvee. I owe him a life. If my daughter ever needs to know who I was, ask Dan. Adeline read in silence. Mira stayed at the back window, turning pages of her own book without making a sound. Owen washed the second mug, dried it, hung it back on its hook. He did not hover. He did not watch her face. He moved around the small space the way a man moves in a room he has made entirely his own, leaving her the privacy of the table. Nobody spoke for 15 minutes. When Adeline looked up, her eyes were red, but she had not cried. The memorial, tomorrow, at Brattleboro Veterans Cemetery. Did you know about it? I go every year on this date. I leave a white chrysanthemum. She looked at him. This man had been visiting her father's grave every year for 22 years, and she had not known he existed. She had stood at her father's funeral at 14, in a black wool coat too big for her, and she had not known that on the same date, every year after, a stranger in flannel would be standing where she should have been standing. She stood up. I need to get to my hotel. I'll come back in the morning. Owen nodded. He did not ask if she was sure. He handed her the coat she had hung by the door. At the threshold, she turned. The journal. May I keep it? It's yours. She hesitated. Then, let me read it here. I don't want to carry it overnight. She set the journal back on the table, carefully, the way one might set down a sleeping child. When the door closed behind her, Owen turned to the last page of the journal. He read the name his father's commanding officer had written there. One name, 5 letters of a given name, 6 of a surname, Vance. He closed the cover. He spoke quietly to the bench under the window. Tomorrow I have something to take care of. Stay with Mrs. Beecham. Mira looked up from her book. The lady at the cemetery? Yes. Okay. She went back to reading. The mist on Brattleboro Veterans Cemetery had not lifted by 9. Adeline arrived alone. She had returned to the camper at 11 the night before to collect the journal. Owen had not asked. He had only opened the door, handed her the book, and closed the door behind her. She carried it now in a canvas tote against her side. The stone read, Colonel Richard W. Carrington, 1953 to 2003. He carried us home. She did not cry. She stood. She put her hand flat against the granite. Owen arrived a few minutes later, 5 paces behind her, a single white chrysanthemum in his hand. He stepped forward, laid it at the base of the stone, and stepped back to stand beside her. He said nothing. After 10 minutes, Adeline asked, Why did my father request to be buried here? Not Arlington. Not the family plot in Boston. A small cemetery in Vermont. Because my father is here too. Owen pointed 5 rows back. And because he believed people should be buried near the ones who actually knew them. Adeline went quiet. A voice came from behind them. You're Adeline Carrington, Eleanor Beecham, 71, holding a ring of cemetery keys, looking at Adeline with the eyes of a woman who has waited too long. I'm the cemetery manager. I've been waiting for you for 22 years. Adeline did not move. You knew I'd come. Your father said you would. He didn't know when. He knew it would happen. Nell led them into a small office at the corner of the cemetery, a wood stove in the middle, a wall of framed unit photographs from 3 wars. On her desk sat a wooden box. Inside the box, a sealed envelope, the wax stamp unbroken. The front addressed in Richard Carrington's handwriting, Adeline Margaret Carrington, to be opened by her alone. He left it along with the journal, Nell said. Owen's father held the book. I held the envelope. That's how your father wanted it. We weren't to know each other. We weren't to communicate. We were each to wait. Adeline took the envelope. Her hands trembled for the first time since she had walked into the camper. I'll step outside, Nell said. Read alone. Mr. Halloran will be at the door if you need him. The door closed. Adeline opened the envelope. Inside, 3 typewritten pages, a black and white photograph, and an old uncashed check made out in her name for $1, the way a father might leave a token to a child to prove the document had passed through his hands. The first page began, Adeline, my dear, If you are reading this letter, it means I am no longer here. I did not take my own life. I want you to know that first. I want you to know it before you know anything else, because what follows will be hard, and you will need that one piece of ground to stand on." She read. Her hands rested on the desk, not shaking anymore, only cold. He explained the contracts. He explained how he had found them. He explained that he had refused, twice, his brother's offer to look the other way for a share. He explained that he loved his brother, and that this was the worst part. He explained that Daniel Halloran would have the journal, that Eleanor Beecham would have the letter, and that they would never communicate with each other so that no one tracking the family could draw a line between them. Then he wrote about her. Half a page. The shape her face had taken at 12. The way she had laughed at his bad jokes when she was 7. The fact that he had missed almost every birthday and would never forgive himself for that, and that he hoped she would. Outside, Owen leaned against the wall of the office, his eyes on the rows of stones. He heard paper turning, then a long silence, then paper turning again. When the door opened, Adeline stepped out. Her eyes were dry. Her face was different. Not CEO. Not grieving daughter. Something else. The face of a person who has just understood that the entire life she had built was built on a lie. She looked at Owen. "I need your help." "Yes. Not now. When I know what to do." "Yes." 2 days passed. Adeline did not leave Brattleboro. She canceled 3 meetings in Boston, told her assistant she had the flu, and rented a small cabin near the campground, half a mile from Owen's camper, a place with a wood stove and a single bed, and a view of trees turning red against the granite ridges. She came to the camper early that morning with eggs and a loaf of bread. Mira opened the door, hair sleep-tangled, face soft, no surprise in her eyes. "Dad's fixing your car. At the garage. You can wait." Adeline sat at the table while Mira drew at the bench under the window. A river. A wooden bridge with a peaked roof. Slow lines, the pencil held lightly between her thumb and 2 fingers. "What are you drawing?" Adeline asked. "The Connecticut River. Dad takes me fishing there. This is the West Dummerston Bridge, the covered one. It's beautiful. My mom drew too. She made pictures for children's books. But she's gone." "I know. Your dad told me." Mira looked up. "Dad doesn't tell much." "He told you?" "A little." Mira held her gaze a beat longer than an 8-year-old usually holds anything, then went back to her drawing. Owen returned near noon, hands black with engine grease, washed at the outdoor spigot before coming in. Adeline had made breakfast. Eggs over easy, toast, coffee in 3 mugs. Mira set the table without being asked, sliding the silverware into place the way someone does when she has been a small partner in a small household for as long as she can remember. The 3 of them ate. Not much was said. Owen reported the Range Rover would be ready in 2 days. Bodywork clean, paint matched on the rear panel. Adeline reported that she had reread the journal from the beginning, every entry from January through the last week of March. There were details her father had recorded that no one else could have known. A specific village outside Basra, the first name of a corporal who had been killed, the shape of the wind on a particular afternoon. It was not a soldier's notebook. It was a father's, written for a daughter who might one day need to know who he had been when she was 4. After breakfast, Mira went outside to play with the neighbor's old retriever. Owen and Adeline sat at the table. She said, "In the letter, my father wrote that Uncle Vance signed a weapons transport contract in 2002 for a shell company out of Beirut, a fake contract. Money funneled into a private account. My father found out. He was going to take it to the Pentagon. A month later, he was dead." Owen listened. He did not react. Police ruled it a suicide. His own service revolver. In his office. Door locked from the inside. No sign of entry. Any sign of something else. In the letter he wrote, "If they kill me, they will make it look like I did it myself. I know how they do it. I saw it in Kuwait." Adeline stopped. "I don't know what to do with this. 22 years. Uncle Vance raised me. He paid my tuition at Harvard. He handed me the company when I turned 25. At my mother's funeral, he held my hand. At my college graduation, he stood where my father should have stood. I have a photograph of it on a shelf in my apartment. He handed you the company because he needed a clean face out front." Adeline looked at him. Owen did not look back. He was watching through the window, where Mira was running with the dog through wet leaves. "You're very direct. You don't need anyone talking around things anymore, Miss Carrington." A long silence. Outside, Mira's laughter came thin through the closed window. Adeline listened to it as if it were a small instrument playing in another room. Then she said, "Adeline. Call me Adeline." Owen nodded once. He did not repeat the name, but the nod was a small promise. That evening, Adeline called Vance from the cabin. She told him she was resting in Vermont for a few days, that the memorial had been hard, that she needed quiet. Vance was warm, concerned. The voice of the uncle who had walked her into her freshman dorm and sent flowers on the anniversary of her father's death every April. He told her to come home soon. The company was closing on a Great Lakes acquisition. Boards were waiting. She told him she would be back by the weekend. He paused. His voice changed by half a degree. "Did you go to the cemetery yet?" "Yes." "Did you meet anyone particular?" Adeline went still for one breath. "Just the manager. An older woman. Beecham." "Good. You know, after this many years, there are people it is better not to encounter again. They only reopen the wound." A cold line ran down her spine. He knows. He knows about the Howeirins. He may have known the whole time. She told him she was tired and hung up. She sat in the cabin in the yellow light from the single lamp, looking out at the maples burning red. Then she got into the rental car and drove to the camper. She knocked at 10. Mira was already asleep. Owen opened the door in his flannel, a book in his hand. "My uncle just asked me if I had met anyone particular at the cemetery." Owen showed no surprise. He pointed to the trail. "Walk." They walked along the campground path without flashlights. A quarter moon. Dry leaves under their boots. No one else in the loop at this hour. The ground was uneven, and Adeline kept one hand at her side, ready to catch herself, but she didn't. Her eyes adjusted. The trees became shapes, then individual trees, then individual branches. Owen spoke. "In 2007, a man came to find my father, a lawyer out of Boston. He offered to buy the camper. $45,000 for a 30-year-old Airstream. My father refused. The lawyer offered him $60,000. He refused again. A month later, there was a fire at the garage where my father was working. He got out, but he lost 2 fingers on his left hand. The investigators called it electrical. My father called it a message. He never told me the lawyer's name. He wrote it in his own logbook. I found it after he died." "What name?" "Marshall Beale. Outside counsel for Carrington Industrial since 2001. Adeline stopped walking. She knew Marshall Beale. Beale had sat in on every board meeting since she had taken over. Beale was the first call Vance made when anything went sideways. Beale had drafted the trust that gave Adeline her shares at 25. Beale had drafted the documents that gave Vance his interim authority at her father's death. "You've kept this for 22 years, 18. I only learned it when my father died. Why didn't you publish it? Take it to the FBI." "Because my father had promised your father he would wait for you. Not for a court. For you." They walked back to the camper in silence. The cold had begun to settle into the ground. Their breath made small clouds and disappeared. Before Adeline got into her car, Owen reached into his pocket and handed her a small flat key, the kind banks issue for safety deposit boxes. "My father took out this box in 2008. I've never opened it. He told me to open it only when you were there." Adeline took the key. It felt heavier than it should have. 9 the next morning. Brattleboro Savings Bank, a small branch on Main Street with a brass door and a single teller window. Adeline and Owen walked in together. The teller, a woman in her early 50s with a careful, steady gaze, checked their identification. She looked at Adeline a beat longer than necessary when she read the name Carrington. She said nothing. She led them into the safety deposit room. Owen turned the key. The box slid out. Inside, a thin stack of documents in a plastic sleeve, a small cassette tape, and a photograph. The photograph showed Richard Carrington as a younger man, standing beside a younger Vance Carrington, 2 brothers, and a third man in civilian clothes. The face familiar at first glance because Adeline had seen it across boardroom tables for 15 years. Marshall Beale, 30 years younger. On the back, in Daniel Howerin's pencil, Beirut, March 2002. Richard says he's being bought. Richard was right. The documents were photocopies of wire transfers from Carrington Industrial operating accounts to a shell company registered in Cyprus, signed by Vance Carrington, dated from 2002 through 2003, 12 transfers, each in the high six figures, each annotated in her father's precise handwriting in the margin. VRC initial, no board ref, no auth. The cassette's label read, RC Last Call, April 8, 2003. Adeline picked up the tape. My father's last phone call. He called my father the night before he died. My father recorded it. Your father knew he was being listened to at his office. He went to a payphone. Adeline was not ready to hear it yet. She put everything back into the box except the photograph and one copy of the wire transfers. She slid the box back into its slot. They walked out into the morning light on Main Street. The teller stood up as they passed her counter. She spoke quietly, only to Adeline, her hands folded on the wood. Miss Carrington, my name is Joanne Beale. Marshall was my father. He passed last year. Before he died, he wrote me a letter. He told me that if Richard Carrington's daughter ever came to open that box, I was to give her this. She held out a second envelope. Inside was a handwritten confession by Marshall Beale Sr., notarized in 2024, admitting that he had helped Vance Carrington stage Richard's death and had forged the signature on the document granting Vance temporary executive authority over the company. He told me to tell you he was sorry. It was too late. Adeline stood on the Brattleboro sidewalk with both envelopes in her hands and could not speak for a long moment. Owen stood one step behind her. He did not touch her. When her voice came, it broke for the first time. 22 years. They were waiting for me for 22 years. They trusted you. She wept then, silently, not covering her face. Owen did not move to hold her. He stood close enough that she knew he was there, far enough that she had space. After 2 minutes, she wiped her face with the back of her hand. I have to get to Boston. Today. I'll drive you. No, stay here with Mira. I'll call when it's done. She walked to the Range Rover. Before she opened the door, she turned back. Owen, thank you for waiting. He did not answer. He only nodded. 4 days later. 47th floor of the Carrington Industrial Holdings Tower on State Street, Boston. The boardroom. 12 chairs around a long walnut table. Outside the windows, the harbor under a slate sky and slow rain on the glass. Vance Carrington sat at one end of the table opposite Adeline. To his right, Marshall Beale Jr., son of the late Marshall, a man uninvolved in his father's history and visibly braced for what was coming. Beside him, 2 board members loyal to Vance, and his personal attorney. To Adeline's right, 3 independent board members, 2 outside auditors with sealed binders, and a federal prosecutor she had reached through a classmate from Harvard Law. Adeline stood. She wore no jewelry. Her father's journal sat on the table in front of her, closed, with the photograph on top. I've called this meeting to present evidence concerning the death of my father, Colonel Richard W. Carrington, in April of 2003. I will also present evidence of unauthorized financial transactions from 2002 to the present, signed by Vice Chairman Vance Carrington. Vance gave a soft laugh, the laugh of an uncle indulging a tired girl. Adeline, sweetheart, you're exhausted. Losing a father is hard, but be quiet, Uncle Vance. The room went still. She had never used that tone with him in her life. She walked through it in order. Bank statements with Vance's signature on every wire. The Beirut photograph with the inscription on the back. The notarized confession of Marshall Beale Sr., copied and distributed to every board member. Vance's attorney reached for it twice. Vance did not stop him. And then the cassette tape. She had listened to the tape alone on the drive back to Boston, pulled into an empty rest area off Interstate 91, the heater running and the windows fogged. She had listened to her father's voice from 22 years before until the tape clicked over to silence, and then she had played it twice more. She played it now in the boardroom. Her father's voice came through the speakers. A voice she had remembered only across 4 childhood conversations. Dan, if you're hearing this, I didn't make it. Vance knows I have the file. He'll move this week. I've sent the journal and the envelope to you. You know what to do. Don't bring Adeline in right away. Wait until she comes on her own. She has to come because she loved me, not because she hates her uncle. That difference matters. Thank you, Dan. I owe you 2 lives now." The tape stopped. No one in the room moved. The 2 board members loyal to Vance were looking at the table. The independent directors were looking at Vance. Vance stood. His face had gone white. "That isn't evidence. That's an old tape. It could be fabricated." The federal prosecutor spoke softly, without standing. "We'll authenticate it. Along with the bank records. Along with Mr. Beale's notarized statement. Along with the witnesses we've already deposed. Mr. Carrington, I would advise you to retain criminal defense counsel rather than your corporate attorney." Vance turned his eyes on Adeline. For the first time in 22 years she saw his real face, not the uncle who had raised her. The man who had killed her father. "Your father was a traitor to this company. I saved it. You killed my father, and you raised me so you could keep the company. Every birthday, every graduation, every time you hugged me, you knew." Silence. The board voted in that meeting. 8-1, the one being Beale Jr., who voted to abstain. Vance was suspended from all duties effective immediately. By evening, he had been escorted from his Beacon Hill apartment in handcuffs by federal agents. Adeline stayed in the boardroom after everyone had gone. She sat alone, the journal open in front of her at the page where her father had written her name for the first time. Adeline Margaret, born May 14, 1990. "I am not there because I am in Iraq. I am sorry." She sat with it until the harbor lights came on. 3 weeks later, the story had broken everywhere. Adeline gave one press statement and one interview to the Boston Globe. She did not appear on television. She did not mention Owen, or the camper, or Mira. She spoke only about her father, about the journal, about a fraud that had taken 22 years to unbury. She refused every other request that came in. Vance had been indicted on first-degree murder, federal wire fraud, and money laundering. The trial was scheduled for spring of the following year. 3 former Carrington executives had taken plea deals within 10 days, all of them naming Vance as the architect. She drove back to Vermont on a Saturday. The maples were bare now. The air was cold and dry. She drove the Range Rover, restored and clean, no trace of the dent that had introduced her to her own life, up the campground road to Fort Dummer. The Airstream sat in its same spot. Smoke rose from the small stovepipe. The afternoon light caught the polished aluminum where Owen had buffed out the seam, and she could not, even looking for it, find the line. Owen opened the door. Mira came past him at a run and wrapped her arms around Adeline's legs without saying anything. Adeline put her hand on Mira's head. She looked at Owen over the child's hair. Owen nodded. That evening the 3 of them ate dinner together. Soup, biscuits, a slow conversation about nothing. Mira presented Adeline with a drawing the camper, 3 figures in front of it, the river behind. Adeline thanked her, folded the drawing carefully, and slid it into her wallet. After dinner, Mira went to bed. Adeline and Owen sat outside on 2 wooden chairs with wool blankets across their laps. A small fire crackled in a stone ring. No stars. Clouds moved low across the trees. Adeline said, "I'm going to keep the camper." Owen looked at her. "I asked my lawyer. My father wrote in the journal that he bought this camper for your father in 1992, out of his own savings. According to his real will, the one Beale forged the original of the camper reverts to me. But my father's note says I should leave it with the Howerin family, so it's mine now. Yes, I'll have the paperwork drawn up, but I want it to stay here. Yours, Mira's." "What are you saying?" Adeline took a breath. "I'm saying I want to come back. Not today, not next week, but I want to be able to come back when I need to." Owen did not answer right away. He looked at the fire. "Adeline." It was the first time he had said her name. "You don't need permission." She did not respond. She watched the fire. After a while she rested her hand on the arm of her chair. Owen rested his hand on the arm of his. The 2 hands did not touch. They were 1 finger apart. Inside the camper, Mira was not yet asleep. She looked through the gap in the curtain and saw her father and Adeline sitting in the dark, not speaking. She smiled to herself, pulled the blanket up to her chin and slept. 5 months later, April. The maples were budding again, soft red against a pale sky. Adeline had stepped down as chief executive of Carrington Industrial Holdings, handing operational control to an outside CEO and retaining the role of non-executive chair. She held 51% of the shares. She no longer kept an apartment in Boston. She had bought a small house in West Brattleboro, 10 minutes by road from Owen's camper, a clapboard cottage with a working fireplace and a porch facing the woods. She worked remotely 2 days a week. The other 3 she gave to a non-profit she had founded, the Carrington Halloran Foundation, supporting families of veterans and preserving wartime correspondence and journals. The board met in a renovated mill on the Connecticut River. Nell Beecham had agreed to serve as an advisor. Today was Mira's 9th birthday. Owen had driven the 3 of them out to the West Dummerston covered bridge, the wooden bridge with the peaked roof that Mira had drawn on the morning Adeline first arrived in the camper. It was one of the oldest covered bridges in Vermont, built in 1872. The long timbers darkened with a century and a half of weather. They walked across. Their boots sounded hollow on the old planks. The Connecticut River moved slow and brown below, rising with snowmelt. Mira ran ahead, a paper bag of sandwiches in her fist, stopping at the small window cutouts on the side of the bridge to look down at the water. Adeline walked beside Owen. Slowly, he said, "I went to my father's grave last month, brought the chrysanthemum. I told him I delivered the journal. What would he say? He'd say it took long enough." Adeline laughed. The first time all day, they sat by the water and ate. Mira looked up from her sandwich and asked, "Are you staying for my birthday?" "Yes. Dad's not good at cookies. I'm not either. Can you?" "I can. I will." Mira nodded, as if this had been the part of the day she had been waiting to settle. Then, casually, "Will you stay the night?" Adeline hesitated for one breath. "I have the cabin nearby." "I know, but you could stay if you wanted. There's room in the camper." Adeline looked at Owen. He was not looking at her. He was watching the river. But he did not say anything to override Mira. "I'll think about it." After lunch, Mira ran off to pick wildflowers along the bank. Adeline and Owen sat on the blanket. The sun came through the budding leaves in long bars across the grass. Owen said, "She asked me last week whether you were going to stay for good. What did you tell her?" "I told her I didn't know. That wasn't mine to answer." Adeline watched the river for a long time. A heron stood in the shallows downstream, motionless. She could see it from the corner of her eye but did not turn her head. The way you don't turn your head toward something you don't want to startle. "I spent 22 years running. I don't know how to stop, but I'm learning. No one is in a hurry." "I know." She looked at him. "That's the hardest part." Owen nodded. He understood. Mira came back with a fistful of wild daisies and dandelions. She separated them into 2 small bunches, slowly, with the careful precision she gave to everything, and handed one to Owen, one to Adeline. "One for my mom," she told her father. Then she turned to Adeline, "And one for your dad." Late afternoon. Brattleboro Veterans Cemetery. Owen, Adeline, and Mira walked the rows together, their shadows long across the grass. The cemetery sat on a low rise outside town, ringed by white pine and stone wall. A few other visitors moved among the stones, far enough away to seem like part of the landscape. They stopped first at Daniel Halloran's headstone. The stone was simple, granite with the Army insignia and a single line beneath the dates. He brought them home. Mira laid her father's bunch of flowers on it. "For Mommy too," she said. Owen did not correct her. He understood what she meant. He stood with his hand on the top of his daughter's head for a moment longer than usual, then let it drop. They walked 5 rows back. To Richard Carrington's stone, Adeline knelt. She laid the wildflowers Mira had picked for her father across the granite. She did not speak for a long time. The wind moved through the pines along the wall and made a soft sound that was not quite a sound. Far off, the bell of a church in town rang the half-hour. Owen stood 5 paces back, as he had the first time. Mira stood beside him, her hand inside his. Adeline stood up. She rested her hand on the stone one last time. She spoke quietly, words only her father heard. "I came because I loved you, not because I hated him. You were right, and I found more than you asked me to." She turned. She walked toward Owen and Mira. Mira held out her other hand to Adeline. She did not ask. She did not say anything. She only held out her hand. Adeline took it. The 3 of them walked out of the cemetery. 3 hands joined, Owen in the middle for no particular reason, except that this was how they had arranged themselves. Mira's hand was small and warm and slightly sticky with sandwich. Owen's was rough across the knuckles from a lifetime of working with his hands. Adeline held both for the length of 1 row of stones without speaking. At the gate, Mira ran ahead to the Range Rover. Owen and Adeline slowed. Adeline said, "Mira asked me this morning what she should call me. What did you say?" I told her Adeline was fine. She nodded. Then she said she would think about it. Owen smiled, a small smile. "She thinks about everything, like her father." They reached the gate. The sun was low, gold through the new maple leaves. Somewhere down the lane a dog barked once and stopped. The air smelled of cold earth and new grass and wood smoke from a chimney in the trees. Owen said, "Do you want to come for dinner at the camper tonight?" "Yes." "Do you want to stay?" Adeline looked at him. She did not answer right away. She looked toward the Range Rover, where Mira stood waiting, waving with her whole arm. She looked at the road behind them, the cemetery wall, the row where two men were buried 5 rows apart who had carried each other through a war and then carried each other through 22 years of silence. She looked back at Owen. Yes, Owen nodded. He did not add anything. They walked together toward the car. 22 years before, a man had written his daughter's name in a notebook in Iraq, not knowing when she would read it. 22 years before, another soldier had promised to keep the notebook, not knowing when his son would deliver it. 22 years later, a Range Rover had slid on a wet curve and struck the rear of a rust-pocked Airstream. It was not an accident. It was not fate. It was only that, in the end, the right person had arrived at the right place at the right time for a journal that had finally been ready to open.